most basic geometric figures is the circle, and so it's very natural to want to look at an algebraic expression of a circle. And so I'm going to show you how to do that with equations of circles, and we'll look at a couple of questions. Okay, so first of all, here I have a circle, and I'm trying to figure out how do I characterize this algebraically. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pick a point on the circumference, and that point is xy. Okay, and now I'm going to draw a straight line from the center of that circle to that point, and we'll label that r for its radius. And the radius and the center here is this point hk, determines what the circle will be. Okay, and so here's what we need. I know from the distance formula, so from distance, I know that r is the distance between hk and xy is characterized like this. We say the difference in your x coordinates squared plus the difference in your y coordinates squared. And you take the square root of all of that. And if you remember, that comes from the Pythagorean theorem, because I can make a triangle here, and one side of this triangle has size or length x minus h, the other side has length y minus k. So x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, and that's our distance. And so actually that'll also give us the equation of our circle is r squared equals x minus h squared plus y minus k squared. Okay, and so that's what we consider the equation of a circle, and typically you call this the standard form. Okay, so again, if you know the center and you know the radius, you can find the algebraic equation of that circle. So here I have a question that says, what circle has radius 7 and center 1, -8? Alright, so all I need is this equation of a circle in standard form. I have the radius, so I know that r is 7. I know that h is going to be 1, and k is going to be -8. So then my circle has equation 7 squared equals x minus 1 squared plus y minus a -8 squared. Okay, so we might clear that up to say 49 equals x minus 1 squared plus y plus 8 quantity squared, and there's my equation. There's my circle. Okay, so that's not too bad. I have another example that's requires a little bit more work, but it's still not too bad here. So let's look at this one. We say let's find the standard equation of the circle whose endpoints of a diameter are -8, 6 and 111. Okay, so now I have a circle here, and I don't know the center, but I know 2 points on the end. Okay, so I know, and I don't know exactly where they are spatially. That's okay. I'll call this one here 111, and I'll call this one here -8, 6. And I'm trying to figure out what circle has those 2 points along its diameter. Alright, so I need two things. I need to find a center, and I need to find a radius. The center comes from the midpoint of those 2 points, because halfway between these 2 points, so here I know that that length is radius, that length is radius, so halfway between the distance here will give me that midpoint. And the midpoint formula, if you remember, is the difference of the squares, is the average of the x-coordinates and the average of the y-coordinates. So my midpoint, or my center here, is just simply going to be the average of the 2 x-coordinates, which is -8 and 1, and the average of my y-coordinates, which is 6 and 11. So my midpoint then is going to be -7 halves and 17 halves. So that is exactly this coordinate here. Okay, now to find the radius, all I need to do is calculate the distance. The radius is going to come from a distance between the midpoint and one of these endpoints. And actually, we don't even have to calculate the distance, because instead of calculating the distance, if I calculate the distance squared, I get r squared, and I'll end up with the circle equation. So that's going to be the difference of my x's. So I can pick either one of these points to be my x and y. I'm going to go pick 1 and 11. So I'm going to have negative 7 halves minus 1 quantity squared plus 17 halves minus 11 quantity squared. Okay? And once I figure out that value, I'll have my radius, and thus I'll have the equation of my circle. So you're going to have to do a little bit of work here. I know that 1 is the same as 2 halves, so this ends up being negative 9 halves squared. And 11 is 22 halves, so I have 17 halves minus 22 halves. That's going to be, what does that give me? A negative 5 halves. So I have negative 5 halves here squared. So then r squared is going to be 81 over 4 plus 25 over 4, which ends up being 106 over 4. Okay, and I think that can reduce down to, what would that be? If you divide by 2, 53 halves. So there's my r squared. So then my equation, finally, is going to be r squared, which is 53 halves, equals x minus the center x-coordinate, so that's that. So you get plus 7 halves, quantity squared, plus y minus 17 halves, quantity squared. The 17 halves coming from here, we called that h, and we called that k. And so there they are, h and k. And so there's the equation of my circle. 53 halves equals x plus 7 halves squared plus y minus 7 halves squared. Okay, I hope this makes sense. This is kind of an introduction to circles and the algebraic equations associated with circles. There are a few other things we could do, and hopefully I can do those too. If you have any questions on this, please let me know. I hope it makes sense, and thanks for watching.